"Is this some kind of joke?" I asked, my voice breaking as laughter and gasps rippled through the ballroom of the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Behind me, where my opening keynote should have been, the 40-foot LED wall played a video of me, my face, my voice, my posture. Only it wasn't me. It was a weapon wearing my skin. I could feel 300 pairs of eyes tighten. Thousands more watched the live stream. The glassy hush of expensive wine glasses, the camera cranes, the spotlights, it all fused into a heat haze. My name is Madison Cole. I'm 38. I built Nova Link systems from a rented garage in San Jose, and a dream that outlived every dismissed pitch deck. Tonight should have been our victory lap. Nova Vision Summit, our annual showcase, a love letter to our engineers, our customers, our partners, to everyone who ever bet on us. Instead, the me on screen sneered at our community initiatives, mocked junior engineers, and tossed off ugly lines about clients I had courted for years. It was precise. It was cruel. It was engineered to humiliate. I gripped the acrylic podium until my knuckles flashed white. I tried a joke, something, anything, to puncture the horror. "Well," I said, with a smile that felt stapled to my face, "that's certainly one way to get everyone's attention." It landed like a plate dropped in a church. "Is it, though?" A voice cut from the back. Bitter laughter followed, first nervous, then gleeful. Phones rose like a metallic forest as people recorded the wreck of my reputation in real time. "It's not real," I insisted, throat tight. "What you just saw is a fabrication, a deepfake." The words stumbled out, tasting like copper. But perception always sprints faster than truth. The stage manager called an abrupt 30-minute break. I walked off stage under lights suddenly too bright and applause that was not for me. Backstage, I folded into a chair as if someone had punched the breath from my lungs. My phone pulsed maddeningly. Alerts, headlines, DMs, Nova scandal at Summit. CEO humiliates staff in leaked video. My assistant, Olivia Price, hurried in, cheeks drained. "Madison, the press are stacked outside. They're asking for a statement. It's bad." She didn't need to say the last word. The whole room already had. The next 72 hours dissolved into a smear of cable segments, hot takes, and emails written like funeral cards. Forensic analysts confirmed it quickly. The clip was synthetic, voice cloned, micro-expressions replicated, temporal warping perfect enough to fool most systems at first pass. The truth existed, but it was outgunned. Investors called with careful concern. A few board members asked about interim optics. Several clients hit pause on renewals. Inside Novalink, people acted supportive, yet a current of unease tugged at every conversation. I could hear it in the longer silences, see it in the averted eyes. At a private dinner in Palo Alto, I overheard an exec murmur the line that has murdered more reputations than lies ever will. "Fake or not, where there's smoke, there's fire." That night, I stood at my apartment window facing the Bay Bridge, the city humming like circuitry, shock hardened into arithmetic. Who did this? Who hated me enough to lace a grenade into the heartbeat of the company I loved? Two names crystallized, inevitable as gravity. Blake Turner, Crosstech Labs' swaggering CEO, the Valley's apostle of bluster, and Rachel Meyer, my ex-co-founder, strategic to the marrow, who left after our ugliest boardroom winter. Blake loved winning publicly. Rachel loved winning permanently. Both had motive. Neither had mercy. I got to the office before dawn. The glass tower felt like a cathedral to endurance. My endurance. Olivia was already there, precise as a metronome, organizing a stack of folders she knew I'd ask for before I knew I'd ask. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Did you?" She tilted her head. "No." "Tell me who you're thinking." "Blake." "Rachel," I said. Blake's style is loud, Rachel's is surgical. This was a scalpel. "Talk to them," she said softly. "People tell you who they are when they're startled." I called Blake first. "Cole," he answered, voice varnished with enjoyment. "Hell of a week." "You've seen it." "Oh, I've seen it," he said, a chuckle leaking through. "Almost too good to be true. Fake or not, perception is the KPI." "It's fake," I said, "and you know it." "Relax. I don't need puppets to beat you," he said. "I win on product." He hung up, blunt, boastful, and not quite slippery enough to be the architect. Then Rachel. "Well, well," she said, Manhattan cutting through every syllable. "Hard to miss your little bonfire." "This feels like you," I said. "If it were me, you'd watch me light the match," she replied, Try looking closer to home, Madison. People like you rarely get destroyed by strangers." The line went dead. Her words didn't. Rachel's warning burrowed under my ribs and scratched. Closer to home. Novalink ran on trust laced with process. Our summit stack, slides, media, run of show, flowed through communications and events, mirrored to a hardened presentation server with air-gapped fallbacks. If the hijack occurred when my talk began, someone had timed it with obscene intimacy. "Widen the search," I told Tom Jacobs, our head of IT. "I want logs from the presentation network, badge swipes for backstage workstations, VPN entries, everything within an hour of my slot." "On it," he said. Tom wasn't the kind of person who said words he didn't mean. Olivia set a coffee beside my keyboard, then another, then a third, as hours bled into data. We mapped access trails, hunted anomalies, fused timestamps like puzzle edges. Nothing stuck. Days later, my phone buzzed at 6:11 a.m. "Tom, found something. Come down." I was in his war room 5 minutes later. Monitors stepped the walls like a command deck. He pointed to an entry. "Remote workstation access to the presentation server began 38 seconds before your first slide was due. Came through a VPN that spoofs internal location." "External," he exhaled. "Internal credentials, communications department." A single hairline fracture ran down the day. "Whose?" I asked. "We're correlating now with building security. Give me 2 hours." Every minute of those 2 hours was a mile. Tom dimmed the lights. A video square appeared. Backstage camera 3. The timestamp matched the exact moment my keynote derailed. A figure in a fitted black blazer stepped to the auxiliary workstation, swiped a badge, typed with fluency born of practice, not panic. The camera was off-axis, but the posture, the hair, the profile were unmistakable even to a stranger, let alone to me. "Anna Carter's credentials were used," Tom said carefully. "But that isn't Anna." My mouth went dry. "No," I said, staring at the frame that had just renamed my recent history. "It isn't." Olivia Price filled the screen. The woman who kept my calendar like a metronome, who finished my sentences in meetings, who caught typos before my neurons registered language. She was the phantom at my summit. I walked the long steel and glass corridor back to my office in a silence so loud it felt like weather. Olivia looked up as I approached, the same practiced sun-clean smile. "Any good news?" she asked. "Nothing yet," I said, a smile pasted to the ache. "But we're getting close." Her calm was a masterpiece. "Good. Whoever did this, I hope they get exactly what's coming." "So do I said. In the small hours, San Francisco glitters with the insomnia of ambition. I watched the lights and tried on versions of the next day like dresses I couldn't quite zip. Confront her privately? It would devolve into denial and erosion. Go public without her in the room? It would look vindictive, invite conspiracy. I needed daylight and due process. I needed the company to see the method, not just the monster. By sunrise, the plan was crisp. At 9:03 a.m., I called Olivia into my office. "Town hall at 4, I said. "We're closing the loop on the deepfake. You've been by my side through this. You'll be on stage with me." She nodded, something like relief passing through her eyes, or victory masquerading as relief. "Of course." Tom rehearsed the forensic ladder with me twice, then a third time. Every log, every swipe, every second had to interlock into inevitability. There could be no leap of faith, only steps of fact. At 3:57 p.m., the atrium filled, engineers in hoodies, legal in navy, sales in the armor of optimism. The air tasted like held breath. "Thank you for being here," I began. The room softened into attention. "We've endured 3 weeks of doubt. Today, we present the truth, step by verifiable step." Tom took the clicker and climbed the staircase of evidence. The mirrored servers, the VPN tunneling, the credential handoff, the backstage badge swipe, the workstation fingerprint residues. The room moved with him. Eyes, minds, belief. He clicked to the final frame. A still image filled the screen. Olivia at the auxiliary console, head tilted, lips pressed, caught between concentration and contempt. The timestamp glowed like a verdict. A sound moved through the room, shock's collective intake. Then silence so complete it could have been a power outage. Tom's voice did not shake. The individual who executed the hijack was Olivia Price. Olivia's chair scraped concrete. "This is absurd," she said, cheeks flushing. "You're twisting." The logs, the footage, the fingerprints, Tom said, steady. The stolen badge belongs to Anna Carter. But you used it, Olivia. I turned to her. I kept my voice even because fury is too cheap for certain betrayals. You did this. Her eyes flashed a dozen stories in a second: defiance, appeal, calculation, memory. You don't understand, she said at last. I didn't want to. Then why? I asked. Her shoulders fell as if unhooked from their strings. Because I'm invisible, she said, voice collapsing into itself. You have the spotlight, the credit, the calls from New York and Dubai. I'm the ghost who makes your brilliance possible. People say your name and never mine. I thought, if they doubted you, maybe they'd finally see me. The room held her words the way a museum holds a weapon, with distance. Ambition isn't a crime, I said quietly. Sabotage is. I looked to security. Escort Ms. Price out and process her termination. I did not press charges. Mercy is its own broadcast, and I needed the oxygen of forward motion more than the spectacle of a courtroom. The news cycle ignited like dry hills after lightning. Commentary, envy, power, and the woman CEO. Panels, deepfakes as corporate weapons. Podcasts turned our pain into episodes with ad breaks and careful outrage. Inside Novalink, something repaired itself audibly. The click of a reset gear. Engineers sent midnight Slack messages that simply said, "with you." A client that had paused a contract unpaused it. The board scheduled a call and opened with the sentence I most needed. "We stand with you." I called Blake. "I owe you an apology," I said. "I suspected you." He surprised me. "Apology accepted," he said quietly. "And I'm glad it wasn't me." I called Rachel. "You were right," I said. "Closer to home." "I usually am," she said, "but there was no victory in it. Be kinder to yourself than this industry will let you be." That night, I closed my laptop and listened to a city that had refused to die with earthquakes or exodus. Survival, I decided, is not returning to how things were. It's building a future that learns where the cracks began. We rebuilt out loud. We open-sourced a slice of our media integrity tooling so smaller teams could harden their events. We launched an internal program that paid bounties for process flaws caught before they mattered. We crafted a plain English explainer for clients about synthetic media risk, signed by me, not legal. I created a standing 30-minute Thursday where anyone, interns, veterans, skeptics, could ask me anything without a manager in the room. The first week was awkward. The second week, a shy QA analyst asked the question that changed a workflow. The third, a junior PM made a suggestion that saved us 7 figures on a vendor contract. The day the paused contracts returned, the office applauded not me, but themselves. I preferred it that way. Sometimes at my desk, after everyone had left, I replayed the town hall, not the reveal, the silence after Olivia's confession. I hadn't lost only an assistant. I'd lost a version of my own certainty. If I missed that betrayal, what else might I miss? So I wrote a rule on an index card and taped it inside my notebook. Trust is not the absence of scrutiny, it's the presence of accountability. Weeks later, I stepped onto another stage. Smaller room, fewer cameras, no cranes. I looked at faces lit by expectation instead of appetite, and I felt something like gratitude for a heart that had learned how to keep beating in public. I was supposed to give you a product roadmap, I said, but I want to start with a different kind of roadmap. I spoke about resilience that doesn't posture, about systems that assume human frailty without punishing it, about mercy that refuses to be mistaken for weakness. When I finished, the applause sounded like a city gentling after rain. Back home, the bay glowed like solder in a good repair. I poured tea, stood on the balcony, and rehearsed a quieter victory. No scandal, no trending tags, just the knowledge that we had walked through a fire built by envy and engineered by code. And we were still building. Olivia wanted to erase me. Instead, she made me unforgettable, and not for the reasons she imagined. The story people told about us changed in the only way that mattered. From, "Did she say that?" to "Look what they rebuilt." I closed the sliding door on the wind, sat at my desk, and outlined the keynote for next year's Nova Vision Summit. Not as an act of revenge, as an act of inheritance for everyone who would come after me and inherit a stronger wall where ours once cracked. On the wall above my desk, the index card waited, a small North Star. Trust is not the absence of scrutiny, it's the presence of accountability. And this time, we all knew how to read it. In the days after the town hall, Tom and I documented everything for the board, a quiet film strip of cause and effect. We printed nothing. We kept it. Air-gapped. We indexed to absurdity. We discovered the practice runs, tiny, invisible edits to non-critical assets in the weeks leading up to the summit. Olivia testing access layers, timing server mirrors, learning how long an alert took to reach a human. Not malice at first glance. Experimentation. Intent matured into sabotage only when she saw how cleanly she could move. There were Slack exchanges where she volunteered to lighten the load for communications, picking up tasks that gave her higher trust. Meetings she sat in that she didn't need. Helpful is a mask ambition wears when it wants a key. I read those logs the way archaeologists read a shard and reconstruct a civilization, humbled by what I didn't see in real time, steadied by the fact that we saw it now. We convened on a gray Monday, the board's faces arranged in a mosaic of caution and calculation. I walked them through the investigation. Tom followed with the forensics. Legal outlined our posture. No charges at this time. HR actions complete. Policies strengthened. A director asked, "Why didn't you detect this earlier?" "Because Olivia did many good things right," I said. "She used competence as camouflage. That's on me. It's also on systems that over-index on trust without tempered oversight." Silence. Then, "What will you do differently?" "We will assume excellence and verify pathways," I said. "We will split access by task, not by title, and I will not confuse proximity with loyalty again." The chair nodded. "Proceed." Approval felt less like victory than like permission to work. I granted one interview, not to the loudest outlet, but to a patient reporter who'd covered us when we were 15 people and a lending laptop. She sat across from me with a recorder and a pen, both old tech, both honest. "I want this to help someone close a hole before they need to," I said. She asked about forgiveness. I told her the truth. Forgiveness is a door I recommend walking through, but not the same day the house is still burning. First, you put out the flames. Then you inventory what's left. Only then do you decide where the door goes. The piece ran with minimal flourish. It cited our open source tools. It linked to our explainer. It quoted me without sharpening me into a caricature. The internet largely shrugged. That was the best possible result. Anna Carter, whose badge was stolen, came to my office trembling, apology spilling out somehow, like she was to blame for being targeted. I told her she did nothing wrong. Then I asked about her work. She was a font of quiet, disciplined insight. 2 months later, she led a project that changed our content pipeline. Security rotated their schedules. Comms implemented dual sign approvals for anything that touched a stage. IT instituted a quarterly Red Team Day where employees tried to break our own rails for bounties and bragging rights. In the cafeteria, someone started a laminated wall. Lessons we paid for so you don't have to. People added stickies about small fixes with big leverage. It was corny. It was perfect. Culture is not the slogans you print. It's the repairs you rehearse. On my desk, I kept 2 letters in a drawer. One to Olivia, never mailed, where I wrote everything I never let myself say aloud about disappointment, envy, and the way a shared calendar can feel like shared life if you aren't careful with boundaries. The other to myself at 26, the winter I almost quit after our 5th investor passed, with a smile sharpened into advice. I told her that believers arrive late sometimes, but when they do, you must still deserve them. I never sent either. They weren't for their recipients. They were mirrors I needed to hold and then put away. One night, an unknown number from Austin. "Blake." "I've been thinking," he said, without swagger. "We're implementing your explainer with our clients. Consider that an olive branch." The world didn't tilt, but I felt one tooth of a gear move. "Thank you," I said. "Don't get used to it," he added, but it sounded more like theater than threat. Rivalry. Revised by reality. A year later, we returned to Yerba Buena. Same lights, same cranes, different bones under the paint. I stood backstage and touched the aux console like a talisman, not a trigger. Before I walked out, I caught my reflection in the dark glass. Older by a weather that doesn't show on resumes. Also steadier. The keynote opened not with our product, but with our process. How we build, how we test, how we fail without fracturing. Engineers on stage told anecdotes. Clients told their own. Applause punctuated humility, not hype. When I demoed the new integrity tooling, the standing ovation wasn't for me. It was for the relief of a community that knew someone somewhere had put sandbags along a river that floods every spring. On Sundays, I walk from North Beach to the Embarcadero and back, a loop stitched by coffee and the chatter of tourists. The weeks after the new summit, I noticed I was walking without narrating the past to myself for the first time in months. I stopped at a bookstore. The owner, who knows me as the woman who buys too many leadership memoirs and exactly one novel per quarter, slid a slip of paper into my bag. For when the noise gets loud, read the underlined parts. It was a slim volume of poems about repair. The underlines were firm. I read them on the Muni home. A city rattled by to remind me survival is public transit with squeaky brakes. You get where you're going because it keeps stopping long enough to take on new passengers. They ask variations of the same question every summer. How do you know who to trust? You don't, I tell them. You build ladders that hold even when one rung fails. You distribute access the way you distribute weight on a bridge. And you remember that most people don't want to. Burn your house down. They just want a window. A hand usually goes up. What about forgiveness? It's cheaper than bitterness and more expensive than denial, I say. Budget accordingly. They laugh. Then they write it down. No one writes headlines about the weeks that follow a repair. They are made of lunch pails and spreadsheets, of unit tests and unglamorous kindness. One evening, I stood again at my window as the bay turned to hammered silver. My index card still lived inside my notebook. Trust is not the absence of scrutiny. It's the presence of accountability. I thought about Olivia, where she was, who she might be without the architecture of my days to brace against. I wished her a life that didn't need to steal light to feel warm. Then I closed the notebook, set tomorrow's agenda, and turned off the office lamp. There are victories that arrive without trumpets. They look like a door, locked correctly, a server patched on time, a team unafraid to tell the truth early. The world did not applaud. It rarely does for the right things. But the city breathed, the company breathed, and so did I. We redrew the map of our systems, not with fear, but with clarity. We diagrammed access like a subway, lines color-coded, transfers explicit, no secret tunnels. Every station had a manager. Every manager had a shadow reviewer. We removed God keys. We retired legacy exceptions that lived on because they were convenient once. We added break glass accounts that required 2 humans and a reason traceable in daylight. People grumbled for a week. Then velocity returned cleaner than before. Constraints, it turned out, were not cages. They were guardrails on a mountain road we drove too fast because the view was beautiful. Rachel was in town. We met at a cafe on Valencia with wobbly tables and excellent espresso. She wore the same navy as the year we fought for the soul of our roadmap. Time gentled the edges, not the mind behind her eyes. "You're quieter," she observed. "I listen more loudly," I said. She smiled at that. "You always had a sermon in you. It's nice to hear the parish got bigger." We spoke about the early days, the austere years when payroll was a cliff with a monthly edge, about mistakes we made and would make again if it meant we learned the same lessons. "Do you ever regret leaving?" I asked. She looked into her cup long enough to finish half a life. "Regret is a tax. I pay it when I have to, not with interest." She set the cup down. "I'm glad you survived what tried to unmake you." I believed her. The Thursday AMA became a ritual. People arrived with questions and left with assignments. I kept a bowl of pens in the center of the room. I liked watching hands reach for ink when brains were ready to act. One afternoon, a shy designer asked why leadership jargon always sounds like furniture catalogs. We laughed so hard the meeting overran, and then we wrote a glossary that banned 10 phrases and replaced them with English. The document went viral internally in the most useful way. Another time, a new hire said, "I think the approvals on content are too slow because we fear blame more than we fear error." We piloted a fix. Clear scopes, faster loops, published postmortems without shame. Our cycle times fell. So did our pulse. Back in Palo Alto, at the same restaurant where I once overheard smoke and fire, an investor raised a glass. To leaders who make their scars operational wisdom. There were questions still. Runway, hiring pace, regulatory weather. We answered all of them without theater. Numbers do their best work when they aren't dressing for attention. After dessert, the oldest partner said to me in the doorway, "A company is a story people tell themselves about the future. You told yours well tonight." I walked into the night with my coat open to the cold on purpose, a sensory reminder that I could choose how much of the world I let in. Our Media Integrity Suite became a product line, alerts tuned for live events, chain of custody visualizations, rapid rollback of hijacked streams. Competitors licensed parts of it. We licensed theirs in return where they were better. The market stopped rewarding secrecy and started rewarding collaboration. A university lab invited us to mentor a cohort building tools for journalists drowning in synthetic sludge. I guest lectured twice and left both times certain the future would be okay because these students, at least, were angry in the right direction. We published a paper, not on algorithms but on governance, the dull, necessary art of deciding who holds what power and how it is watched. The citations were modest, the effects were not. Months after the summit, a package arrived with no return address, my old leather notebook from the year we signed our first Fortune 500 client. Inside was a sticky note in Olivia's precise script. I'm trying to become someone I wouldn't have wanted to ruin. There was no address to answer. I didn't need one. I placed the notebook on a shelf I could see from my desk, not as a shrine to pain, but as a mile marker we'd passed. If revenge is a fire that needs constant wood, closure is a hearth that warms without burning more forests. I chose the hearth. At an all-hands, I announced a new role. Director of Event Systems Integrity. Anna Carter's name appeared on the screen, and the room erupted into the kind of applause people save for the moment a narrative corrects itself. She stepped up with a blush and a composure I recognized as the beginning of authority. I used to think quiet work was invisible, she said into the mic. Turns out it's just inaudible until the right amplifier arrives. I wished I had said it first. A healthcare client invited us to a dry run of their annual conference. No journalists, no photo ops, just their AV crew, our team, and 3 hours of what-ifs. We simulated hijacks, rollbacks, fail-safes. We talked about what to say live if a deepfake appeared mid-panel. We wrote sentences that were both humane and unambiguous. This content is not authentic. We are pausing to verify. Thank you for your patience. No one ever puts those lines on a billboard, but I have never been prouder of a paragraph. When I finally gave the product roadmap talk I'd meant to give the night of the deepfake, I kept one section exactly as it would have been then. Features, timelines, the math of ambition. And then I added a section called Routines That Save Us, a catalog of practical rituals. Shift-left security, peer reviews on live assets, post-mortems that end with one thing we'll never do again. I watched people take notes not because the ideas were novel, but because they were specific. Specificity is kindness when fear is general. The ovation at the end felt like relief braided with resolve. On the anniversary of the worst night, I returned to the balcony with a cup of tea that steamed in the coastal chill. The city hummed, unconcerned with our personal mythologies. I thought of everyone who had stood near the blast and chosen to build anyway. The engineers who shipped fixes, the assistants who kept calendars steady, the interns who asked better questions than the veterans wanted to answer. I opened my notebook, the old leather one, and wrote a line I hoped a future version of me would read on a different hard night. You are not the thing that broke. You are the hands that learn to mend. I closed the book. The bridge lights blinked a slow, patient code. Tomorrow's agenda waited, mercifully ordinary. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about inheritance, of lessons, of systems, of a steadier way to lead. And, for the first time in a long time, I slept. We started ending meetings with one concrete next step instead of great discussion. We logged decisions in a living page anyone could read without asking. We made a Slack emoji for flag this process gap, and people used it so often we had to paginate the fix list. None of this would trend on the internet. All of it would make us harder to break. If you ask me what changed most, I won't say reputation or revenue. I'll say posture. We stand differently now, shoulders not high with defensiveness, but set with readiness. When a new hire asks about the deepfake, people don't lower their voices. They tell the story as a case study, not a campfire myth. They end with what we built, not what we feared. I used to think leadership was a lighthouse. Now I think it's a harbor, a place where battered ships arrive and depart safer than they came. That will be enough. There is a moment after a crisis when you hear the ordinary again, the printer warming up, the elevator ding, laughter at a meme. That is when you know the repair has taken. We kept that sound. We plan to keep it.